Right now, somewhere in a nondescript gym, a man is being punched in the face on purpose. He paid for this. He will do it again tomorrow. And in 18 months, if everything goes right, 40,000 people will watch him do it live. That sounds insane. But the real answer is far stranger. What you are looking at is not a modern sport. It is one of the oldest survival systems your species ever built, wearing gloves. Your brain was not designed for a cage. It was designed for a savanna. Somewhere along the way, those two things collided and a fighter was born. Why does a person choose this? Why would anyone volunteer for pain, for years of obscurity, for a 1 in a million shot at a belt? The answer starts long before the UFC existed. It starts with a rank. Every human social group that has ever been studied has one. A hierarchy. Anthropologist Napoleon Chagnon spent years documenting the Yanomami people of the Amazon, and he found something uncomfortable. Men who had demonstrated fighting prowess had more status, more alliances, more offspring. Violence, or the credible threat of it, was not chaos. It was currency. Your ancestors did not fight because they enjoyed pain. They fought because rank kept you fed, kept you protected, kept your genes in the pool. That instinct did not disappear. It just lost its purpose. Modern life gives you almost no legitimate outlet for physical dominance. You cannot punch your boss. You cannot wrestle a promotion out of a rival. So the drive sits there, unused, humming under the surface of polite conversation. A fighter is someone who found a legal cage to put it in. Think about the first level. The amateur circuit. Unpaid. Unglamorous. Fought in front of a few hundred people in a community center that smells like bleach and old carpet. Why would someone do this for free? Evolutionary biologist David Carrier has a theory that sounds almost too simple. He argues that the human face, specifically the robust, thick-boned face of early hominins, evolved partly as a shield, a structure built to absorb a punch, not a metaphor, an actual anatomical adaptation for taking a hit and staying upright. Your face was, in a very real sense, built for exactly what that amateur fighter is doing on a Tuesday night for free. That is stage 1. Prove you can take the hit. Prove your body remembers what it was built for. Stage 2 is where most people quit. This is the regional circuit. Small promotions, real bruises, real losses that nobody outside your hometown will ever hear about. Here, the fight is not really against the opponent. It is against your own nervous system. Every time you get hit, a primitive circuit in your brain screams one instruction: run. Your amygdala does not know the difference between a fist and a saber-toothed cat. It just knows something struck you and wants you gone. Psychologist John Archer has spent decades studying aggression, and one of his most consistent findings is that fear and aggression are not opposites. They are neighbors. They share the same neural real estate, the same flood of adrenaline, the same racing heart. The difference between a fighter and everyone else in that room is not the absence of fear. It is what they do with it. A fighter learns, slowly and painfully, to let that ancient alarm ring without obeying it. That is not bravery in the way movies show it. It is closer to a skill, a rewiring. By stage 3, something else starts happening. Testosterone, not in the cartoonish way people imagine it. Neuroendocrinologist Robert Sapolsky has shown that testosterone does not simply cause aggression on its own. What it actually does is amplify whatever social behavior already gets you status in your environment. In a fighter's environment, status comes from dominance. So, testosterone does not turn a normal person violent. It sharpens the specific tool that environment rewards. Put a fighter in a locker room where respect is earned through discipline and control, and the same hormone fuels precision instead of recklessness. Context decides what the biology becomes. This is the level where fighters start getting noticed. Regional titles, local fame. A few thousand followers who did not exist a year ago. And here is the strange part. The body is now covered in small, permanent evidence of every collision. Scar tissue above the eyebrows, thickened knuckles, a nose that no longer sits quite straight. Your ancestors would have recognized these instantly. In tribal societies across history, visible battle scars were not something to hide. They were social proof, evidence you had faced danger and survived it. A fighter's face is, in a very real sense, an ancient resume. Then comes the level almost nobody reaches. The organization, the UFC, or something close to it. Less than 1% of everyone who ever steps into a gym gets here. What changes is not the violence, it is the exposure. Now, the fight happens in front of millions. And this is where an old evolutionary mechanism gets switched on at a scale it was never designed for. Humans are exquisitely tuned to public reputation. For most of your species' history, your survival depended on what your tribe of maybe 150 people thought of you. Anthropologists call this your natural social ceiling, the number of relationships a human brain can meaningfully track. A UFC fighter walking into an arena is having that ancient 150-person circuit triggered by a crowd of 40,000 strangers and a camera broadcasting to millions more. The nervous system does not know the difference between a tribe and a stadium. It just knows an enormous number of people are watching to see if you are strong. That is why the walkout is often more physically taxing than the fight itself. Heart rates recorded backstage before UFC bouts have shown fighters hitting 180 beats per minute before a single strike is thrown. Not from moving, from being watched. And once the fight starts, something almost paradoxical happens. Elite fighters often describe the moment of highest danger as the calmest. Time slows down. The crowd noise disappears. This state has been studied under the label of flow, and it shares a strange kinship with a much older survival state, the calm precision of a hunter closing in on prey where panic would only get you killed. The nervous system that made your ancestors dangerous hunters is the same one making a fighter dangerous in a cage. 10,000 years of separation between hunting mammoths and headlining a pay-per-view, and the underlying machinery has barely changed. Here is the twist almost nobody expects. The fighters who last longest at the top are rarely the most naturally aggressive ones. They are the ones who learn to control the ancient system rather than be ruled by it. Champions describe training not as building rage, but as building calm under threat. The goal was never to become more primitive. It was to master the primitive parts that were already there. So what does this mean for you, sitting on your couch, watching two people who have spent a decade rewiring their nervous systems to do something your body still instinctively wants to run from? You do not have a cage. Most people never will. But you still carry the exact same hierarchy-tracking brain, the same fear and aggression circuitry sitting one synapse apart, the same hunger for status inside a tribe that no longer exists in the form it evolved for. You feel it every time you brace before a difficult conversation, every time your heart rate spikes before public speaking, every time you catch yourself measuring your worth against someone else's success. A fighter did not invent a new kind of human. He just found one of the last remaining arenas where the oldest parts of you are allowed to compete in the open. Right now, somewhere in a nondescript gym, a man is being punched in the face on purpose. But maybe that is not what you are really looking at. Maybe you are looking at the only place left where an ancient, buried instinct finally gets to step into the light.